ji jimbur zordan hingmi jang zonen monam jimbur ngam gyam ta bakar tarngam santo shirmar to tumba tiji janla ki sham tsara ne chen ro tserni jangam so jawar tuji shan la yela jingme panzo jala sora da gong ti toban bawra shinji lo
The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it here, receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the Buddha's true meaning, to liberate all beings, and thus generate the supreme bodhicitta.
캬브른 장랑 샘친 척서나 곡서를 할래 손음 총의지 얼랑들 공지 양치 대빈 좀 얼다지 문주 때니 망진 칫 칼란 조장 고땅 지바 고도가 갑디 지 첼로 호메드 뇽모 문지르 멧 대체가라 땅보 집샤고 종메다 사르제 칸냠 지바르티 Nirda mechang kipa vadmet me gangyang zamchir semchin yishar chak teni rangmo yignem kayang le marnang yi chak tsin chad ma yi chak teni tetse gutch sonam chung nyomu ngungir mekyang le sani lang sani teti langzhin marnam chitpa yin zanglang yisi chakba te durjir dan ne shangdo rinagbo gandhi kangra shangner pungadar dan terni varna majum soyi na zhizhi chizhi huxit rngapche pa yanlag gyardan chi kangwa go chogzhi kabab zhili mbapi chi ganga sirda bakya sidar nam majum sole lanvdan gayeb kurni chipchan rngapgin kurdang lanchigdo chogzhi gyamsur rng vapa yin 손좀 잠위 적지 동보래 샹동 소롱 쓰르드 겨와나 란점 쥐쥐 지비 쓰르당 총 잠위 샹거 견시르 데르크드 적 데네 머름 갑데 데이 어양 겨 첼로 시와 떡네 공티에 근정 고르니 공와 리스케장 godnon dom dan longam kalan ru
Now let us continue with our class on the wish-fulfilling treasury. Currently, we're on the 4th chapter, on the formation of the sentient world, the animate world, within which we've already covered on the form realm, formless realm, and the desire realm's formation. Especially when it comes to the formation of desire realm, we have already covered on the formation or the beginning of the celestial beings. Now we're going to talk about the beginning of the humans, of the human beings, of the Jambudvipa especially, and the 4 great continents. Firstly, we're going to look at the emanation, and then later we're going to talk about the birth from womb, from eggs. Now let's look at the actual explanation, the actual content. Let's look at the first one. The first one talks about the emanation, birth from emanation, especially on the formation of sentient beings of Jambudvipa. Deva of Abhashvaras descend due to decreasing merit. Coming down to this continent with the companions, the numbers of beings proliferated. The 4 continents, including Jambudvipa and Uttarakuru, in fact, all the sentient beings living on the 4 continents descend from the heavens above, especially from the Abhashvaras heaven. After their descent or falling into the desire realm, slowly the proliferation of human beings started. And at that time, back around that time, there's no birth from womb yet, like how we're born, how the human beings are born nowadays. Rather, the beings are emanated. Lots of professional archaeologists or scientists, they constantly seek for evidence to prove the beginning of human beings. The creation of human beings. Sometimes they seek for skeletons, and sometimes they seek for all kinds of tests and numbers through various kinds of machines. But I think those kinds of explorations are, of course, very good. However, they simply depend on their hypothesis to look for the origin of human beings. And seek for the according evidence, but their hypotheses are not necessarily the actual beginning of human beings. At the beginning of the human beings, the human beings were born from emanation, and the time of their growth were rather fast, and the time of their death, rather, they would not leave any bones and fleshes out, because at the time of their death, they would simply melt into light. Many felt that the wish-fulfilling treasury is really great, especially Kempos and Kimmels and people with great wisdom, because they realized that the past education that they received rather locked them into a certain type of mindset and a certain type of hypothesis. But now, after studying the wish-fulfilling treasury, it provides a bigger space for us to contemplate on the beginning of the world and on the beginning of the sentient beings. Of course, it is not necessary that you would come to a conclusion right away. However, it provides you other methods of contemplating the beginning of the world, the beginning of the human beings, and the beginning of consciousness. Especially, I think, to lots of the beginners, this is definitely quite eye-opening. In the later part, we'll study more and more of these kinds of wisdom. As I stated, it is necessary for you to cross-reference to the auto-commentary. Recently, I noticed many of you are focusing your time on chanting the Vajrasattva mantra. So after class, I noticed many people just put their books away and stop reading the books anymore. In this way, you won't be able to gain the knowledge very thoroughly. So you really need to dedicate the time to truly study the content. Chakmei Rinpoche once said that though the person who gives the Dharma teaching is not necessarily the Buddha of the three times, but at the time of that person gives the Dharma teaching, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would grant blessings in the way of entering that person as the blessed light, so that whatever comes out from the speech of the Dharma teacher, the audience would be receiving the blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as well. Let us look at this verse. Today we're going to talk about the formation of the sentient beings of the Jambudvipa. Let's look at the very beginning. At the very beginning, there is the beginning of Kalpa. The beginning, after the beginning Kalpa, deteriorates, and then a new kalpa started, and then the new world that is formed, everything is completely new. There's no sentient being living over there yet. As we stated before, that usually all the heavens below the first dhyana would be completely destroyed by the 7 fires and 1 flood. After that, the celestial beings would descend from the Abhashvara's heaven. And the first level of heavens would be of the Brahma's heaven. So at that time, since Brahma's heaven is above the Jambudvipa, so the Brahma's heaven could not see what is above them, so they would be able to see that when they descend to the Brahma's heaven, they were the first ones to be there. And then after that, they notice there are human beings there. So they mistakenly thought that the Brahmas mistakenly thought that, oh, I created those human beings and created everything that is over there. That is why nowadays lots of the religions talks about the creation theory, that a god or God with different names created everything in this world, as well as the sentient beings. Maybe there are different names, and one of which is Brahma. In India, many of the religious schools believe that it's the Brahma, that the great Brahma, that created the world. But if you were to truly investigate into the causes and conditions, it is indeed not created by the Brahma. In some of the Western religions also, they would talk about how human beings are created by gods. They're very similar to that creation theory. In fact, the Brahmas also were descended from the Abhashvara's heaven. How are the human beings proliferated on this earth? It was at the beginning when there was a celestial being. Because of the decrement of merit, he then fall just like a drop of water into the world, into the human realm. But of course, it's not just falling like a plane crash. Rather, it is more like taking rebirth. According to Agana Sutra as well as other sutras, it says that because the celestial beings' merit decrease and then they would die, after their death, they would take rebirth in the way of emanation into Jambudvipa. Now, this celestial being, after being born in the method of emanation, after a long period of time, another celestial being also take rebirth in Jambudvipa in the method of emanation. Perhaps this particular celestial being also decreased in the merit, therefore, from Abhashvara's heaven or from different heavens, another celestial being descend to Jambudvipa. Now, the first celestial being that took rebirth in Jambudvipa was extremely happy because he had been in this world for a long period of time alone, being alone. And after meeting another celestial being who took rebirth in Jambudvipa, he was extremely happy. So the first celestial being would call the other as his companion. But of course, this companion is not like spouse. A companion. So the first one felt a sense of companionship, just as if you were to be at a foreign country, but you encounter another one from China, and then you would feel quite familiar with that person and very happy. So these two celestial beings would accompany each other. Now, in terms of emanation, some of the beings were emanated and descend from Abhashvara's heaven and some from the other heavens. And they would take rebirth or emanation in different worlds because there are so many worlds in the Saha worlds. Some some of them after their death, because of causes and condition, maybe because of animation, they would take rebirth as a hungry ghost realm or of hell realm. And then after they take rebirth as hell realm beings or hungry ghost realm beings, after they've already taken the matured fruition, then they would probably take the form of living in the human realm. So slowly and slowly, human beings proliferated. This is the teaching in Buddhism. According to Buddhism and many other religions and many other teachings, it states that the disposition of human beings are actually of celestial beings. We're of more of the royal dispositions. We did not evolve from the oceanic animals and then become the animals with spines or become mammals and slowly stand up according to the evolution theories. Though the scientists nowadays would state in such a way, but is it really reasonable? Is it really accurate? That is very difficult to say. The human beings, are we a product of evolution or product of regression? It definitely needs our further observation and contemplation. From certain aspects, all the way from the development of human society, all the way from the ancient time and to the feudal time and to the current time, yes, there are materialistic developments in terms of our provisions. The materialistic developments till today, especially the ones we have today, definitely surpass of the past. But on the other hand, if we were to look at our spiritual development, if we were to compare ourselves to the great masters of the past, are we more smarter and with have more wisdom and have more happiness than the great masters of the past? Do we have a higher moral standards than the great masters of the past? When we look back around 2,500 years ago, the two adornments of the six supreme ones, as well as the 80 siddhas of Buddhism, as well as the hundreds of thousands of great masters of the past, and when we read into the compositions of theirs, it is very difficult for us to surpass of that. When we study Abhidharma, study the Buddhist logic, can we surpass the Nagarjuna? Can we surpass the great master Chandrakirti? So from that perspective, though that we have progressed in terms of our materialistic developments, however, our wisdom has not. Not only we have not progressed in the wisdom, we got more and more confused.
So
I believe the majority of you studied under the influence of materialistic teachings, we have the great influence of evolution. Though I am not refuting all of the views provided through such education, I'm simply pointing out the history of evolution theory has not been that long. There are many people in support of the evolution theory because it does have abundant hypotheses and abundant evidence to support their particular theory. For example, Yuval Harari, in his book A Brief History of Humankind and A Brief History of Tomorrow, I recognize that he found lots of the theories and evidence to support the evolution theory. along with the combination of quantum physics, of technology, of the future predictions, but majority of them are still through looking for the patterns and through his own dualistic thoughts to predict the future. With the evidence of what had happened in the past in the history, of course, he's really smart and very good and very keen. But whatever has been expounded are his own points of view. I think we need to still make the observation whether his observation would be accurate, whether his point of view would be accurate or not. The evolution theory is rather quite controversial even within the academic circle, within both the East and the West. However, it has already become a framework that's been used in our educational system, and it has been used for over 100 years. For that reason, it's very difficult to change it within a short period of time. As human beings, it has this mentality of this herd mentality. We would parrot the others. According to the Shastra of 400 verses, where his citizen drank the water that is poisoned, so everyone went insane. The king, being the only one sane, had to drink the water as well, so that he would be able to blend into the kingdom. But following the herd, this kind of herd mentality is definitely incorrect, because there are more sentient beings living in hell realm and hungry ghost realm. For that reason, doesn't mean that the human value is wrong.
那这个是我们刚才那个很多人就是讲人类的起源是到底是什么样。
Now this is the beginning of human beings. According to wish-fulfilling Treasury, it says that we, the human beings, are the descendants of the celestial beings from Abhashvara's heaven. I think this is quite wonderful to explain to the others, because instead of telling others that you are a product of the evolution from being an ape first, it would be better to say that, oh, I am the descendant from the celestial realm, though that this particular celestial being were fallen from the celestial realm to the Jambuvipa. Still, we can consider ourselves as the descendants of the celestial beings from Abhashvara's heaven. Now, the next verse, traversing space, adorned with lights, consumes bliss as food, within immeasurable lifespan without possessing confusion. This is the beginning of a kalpa. Over here, it expounds the 5 particular characteristics of the beings around that time. Firstly, the celestial beings at that time, after descending from heaven, they have magnificent appearance, especially they would be able to traverse in the space. They don't need any other tools to commute from one place to another. They don't need cars, or they don't need to walk even. They can just traverse within space. They would be able to travel to wherever they would like, as much as they want. Nowadays, it's very difficult to travel, especially during the pandemic. There's lots of lockdown, the quarantine, and it's difficult to buy tickets. And even if you were to get onto an airplane, it's very inconvenient to sit in there, and you would have a sense of fear sitting inside of an enclosed area. At that time, people really feel that wouldn't it be wonderful if we can just fly through air? But when you think about flying as how the sparrows and crows fly with the support of their wings, But the celestial beings doesn't need to fly or traverse in space with that kind of movement. So they can traverse in space effortlessly. The second one is that they're adorned with light. Their body emanates lights, lots of luminosity. And the third one is that the celestial beings at that time, the beings that descend from celestial realm at the beginning of the kalpa, they consume bliss as food. This is probably the bliss that's generated from meditation. The meditative dhyana is their food. This is the third one, which is food. And the third one is that they have, the fourth one is that they have immeasurable lifespan. People nowadays would be quite contented if they can live up to 80 or 90 years of age. But back then, at the beginning of the kalpa, the beings would live for immeasurable numbers of years. And there is no processing confusion and no processing afflictions. This is the part I envy the most. This is a quality that I truly admire. As mundane beings, we have so many processing afflictions. But as the beings at the beginning of the kalpa, those human beings had no afflictions and no confusions. People nowadays would think that, well, how can you even fathom to live for immeasurable lifetime, immeasurable years? Living for 100 years would be a stretch nowadays. When we watch the short video, do you remember that it talks about how the kings would live for 20,000 years and 40,000 years and so on, and their time of reigning the kingdom would be 20 or 40 or 60,000 of years. That was around the beginning of the kalpa, and then after the beginning of the kalpa, there is the completion kalpa or the perfect kalpa. Now we're in the end of the kalpa, the degenerated kalpa. So let's look at the beginning of the kalpa. Around that time, there is no cities. The ground is rather very flat and beautiful. There is no sun, no moon, no male, no female. Since all the sentient beings at that time were from emanation, the Jambudvipa at that time doesn't have the hills and mountains. Rather, it is very smooth and even. The geologists, they had certain explanations saying at that time the ground was rather quite flat and smooth. There were no houses and no buildings or cities. And at that time, there is no sun, no moon, no stars that could divide the time. There is no season, year, month, time. There is no moment, instance. There is no such concepts that differentiates the time, the day, the night, or it's winter, it's summer, it's so and so years. There is no such kind of division. Nowadays, everyone wears watch. Rather, not everyone. Only the old-fashioned people wear watches nowadays, it seems. Oh, you're here. What are you confessing about? About eating ghee? No, there's nothing to confess about of eating ghee. Anyhow, at that time there is no time, no sun, no moon, and there is no male and female production parts. There is no division of male and female. At that time, the sentient beings would call each other as sentient and sentient. Some of the sutras or shastras said it's calling each other as sattva, sattva. This is my translation, is sentient. But according to some of the sutras, the particular name or term that's used is sattva. What it means is that at that time, people don't have name. Rather than nowadays, we each have a different name so that we can call each other as names. But back then, people would just call each other as Sattva, Sattva. I think this is probably good because in Tibet, we have this tradition. For example, if my name is Yuan He, and if a person that's close to me who has the same name and died, then I would have to change the name. Because according to the folklore, it says that when that deceased person in the bardo heard his name or mistaken your name as his name, he would come to visit you as a ghost. So that's part of the tradition. I think even nowadays around the Qinghai County, around the Qinghai province, people would still call each other as Sattva. People would refer to each other as sentient beings. In the Tibetan language, we would say that, oh, this sentient being is quite ill, that sentient being is very successful. In the Chinese language or in the other language, we would say that, oh, this person. But in the Tibetan language, sentient, the one that has conscience, has consciousness, so the sentient being. There are the different ways of referring to each other. Also, at the beginning of the Kalpa, the human beings are very similar to that of the celestial realm. It is particularly why the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, did not manifest during the beginning of the Kalpa, because there was no affliction, there was no suffering. So even if the Buddha were to take birth over there and then to manifest, he would not be able to liberate sentient beings because everyone was very equal at the time and everyone was born in Jambudvipa through emanation. And then later, through the observation of the Buddha, after there are more of the dividing classes that appears in this world, the Buddha then came to Jambudvipa and to liberate sentient beings. At the beginning of the Kalpa, the Buddha would not be able to liberate them, to help them to get liberated, because at that time everyone's very similar to the celestial beings and there's not much of afflictions that people could work on. After a while, there is a sound coming through the space which spread the sound or a manifestation of a person. What it means here is that instead of a manifestation of a person, it is a manifestation of the sound or the name of a person. In Tibetan language, a person is me. In Chinese, of course, it's a different name. The Amdo dialect of person, which is me, but in other regions, people don't say me, it's me. So even in different regions of Tibet, the people won't be able to understand it. So at that time, there's a sound that came through, calling people as people. Through space, just like how in Sanji Sechik naturally spontaneously manifested out of the blessings of the Buddhas in the space. What it means is that at that time, in the space, there's a loud sound reverberating in the space, saying people. At that time, after hearing the sound, there's a great proliferation of human beings on the earth. So sometimes we can see that name is indeed really important to give names. But for human beings, of course, it's not a good thing, because after that, more afflictions were manifested. The names are indeed really important. In Tibet, we pay great attention of giving names. Sometimes, out of very special reasons, we would give very different names to different children. To give you an example, if a family tend to have premature death of children, then the family would specifically give some terrible names to the newborns, such as the demoness, or something related to animals such as dog and pigs and so on. Sometimes those names really sound horrible. But this is a tradition in Tibet. In Tibet, sometimes we would give boys female names, girl names, just to prevent the premature death. So we can sometimes notice very handsome young boys with terrible names. But those kinds of names are to avoid some negative conditions and negative consequences. On the internet nowadays, netizens constantly give themselves very strange names. And some of them, I notice actually a lot of people likes the names that includes maras or demons, something that has a negative connotation. I think it's quite important to pay attention to the causes and conditions. An auspicious condition is important. I notice the Tibetan youth tend to have netizen names such as Poison, Mara, Son of Demon, or Enemy, things like that is something really negative. I think that's not very necessary. We should pay attention to auspicious conditions in different aspects of our lives. Otherwise, if you were to plant such kind of seed, you may then later to be reborn as a child of the Mara. You never know. And that would be unnecessary and completely avoidable at this time. Anyhow, at that time, after the term of human were born in the space, the sound of it and the name of it were born in the space, the lifestyle of the celestial beings, the lifestyle that is just like celestial beings has slowly changed. How so? Later, the lifespan and the light all decreased of these human beings, same as their merits and their morality. There were no processing afflictions, but the afflictions started to manifest, just as how the flowers at the time of coming to blossom, first of all, there has to be a blossom. There has to be a flower blossom before it's a full blossom, that is. The human beings at that time, since they had no coarse greediness and anger and ignorance, but it's about to blossom because the causes and conditions has already matured and has already appeared, and later will come to maturation. The body of the humans at that time, unlike what we have nowadays, their body were transparent, translucent, and the features are magnificent. Also, at that time, there is no differentiation of male and female. According to Parinirvana Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Long Agama Sutra, the Medium Agama Sutra, also Agana Sutra, and Abhidharma creation of world Shastra, they all talk about how the human beings descend from Abhashvara's heaven. With time, their merits slowly decrease, same as their merits also has declined, so that we can see that the angle is completely different than what we know now. Now let's look at Jambuvipa. There are a few signature landmarks in Jambuvipa, such as the ocean without heated afflictions, and then the Vajrasana, as well as the Gandes Snow Mountain. Some scholars consider Jambuvipa as the now Asia, and they would consider the center of Asia is Himalaya mountains, or sometimes Gandes River, Gandes Mountain. Himalayas sounds a bit similar to Mount Sumeru. That's just something I thought of just now. It's not a conclusion. Anyhow, the other day we stated that if we were to look at the 3,000-fold world in such a minuscule way, it would create lots of conflicts. There would be lots of contradicting points. So we should not look at the 3,000-fold world in such a way. Rather, it is quite grand. It is not that small. Over here in the verses, it says that the name is Jambuvipa. There is the Vajrasana, and the north from it, after 9 black mountains, there is a snow mountain, and north of that, there is the fragrant mountain. Between the ocean free of heated afflictions and the fragrant mountain, they are located the water of 8 qualities, and there are about 50 yujanas in boundaries from 4 directions. Now, why is it called Jambuvipa? It is because there is a tree that's called Jambuvipa, and that is how Jambuvipa got the name of it, because that Jambuvipa tree adorns the Jambuvipa continent. The fruit of the Jambuvipa tree would fall into the lake, which is called the ocean without heated afflictions. It's called ocean without heated afflictions, but it doesn't mean it's an ocean. It's rather a large lake. In terms of continent, we would call it continent, or a place that is surrounded by ocean. But in the continent, it is also permeated by all kinds of water on top of it. There are sources of water that would go through the continents too. Therefore, the name is called continent. In our world, we would call this kind of layout as islands. But sometimes we would also call them continents. It's only a matter of sizes. There are the large continents and the small continents. It is called the Jambuvipa continent. It is named in such a way because it is encircled by ocean. Within it, there are different rivers that will go through it. The center of Jambuvipa, there is the Vajrasana in India. It is said that all the Buddhas of the good aeon, at the time of attaining full enlightenment, they would sit under, they would attain enlightenment on the Vajrasana. Even at the time of the degradation kalpa, the Vajrasana would be hanging over there in mid-space, just like a bell. North of Vajrasana, there would be 3 black mountains, and then another 3 mountains, and then another 3 mountains, one set after another. So altogether, there are 9 black mountains. From the geography aspects, there are a few lines of the large mountain ranges. There's the Himalaya mountain. That's the longest mountain range over there. When I speak of this, I remembered my geology teacher. He had lots of beard, and sometimes when there are talks about how there are, so humans were transformed from or evolved from apes, and then we would say that, oh, Mr. Wang, were you an ape before as well? So he really didn't like our class. Nowadays, from the map, from, for example, Google Map, you can also see the mountain ranges between India to Ganges mountain. You can roughly recognize the 9 black mountains. Of course, when it says black, it is not necessarily all colored black, because there are all kinds of trees and forests that grows over there as well in certain areas. Especially around Nepal's area of it, there are more trees. After the 9 mountains, 9 black mountains, and there's the Ganges snow mountain. The Ganges, do you remember there was a movie about the Ganges mountain, which is called Gan Rinpoche in Tibetan? How many of you had been there? I really want to go. If I were to be on a vacation, I would definitely go to Gan Rinpoche. I was joking because it's difficult to go to Gan Rinpoche. So Gan Rinpoche being a snow mountain, north of it there is another mountain called Fragrant Mountain. The north of that there are another 2 fragrant mountains, and within it or in between it there's the ocean without heated afflictions. The shape of it is rather quite special. It is of a square shape, and it has 50 ujanas from the 4 sides, the 4 directions. Within this ocean or this large lake, there is the water of the 8 kinds of qualities. If you remember that we had the story of how a sage, after drinking the water from this lake, he couldn't get any heated afflictions because it has the quality of cooling. And lived in there is the Naga king that doesn't have any heated afflictions. He lives over there. I believe we studied the sutra that's requested by the Naga king. I think we mentioned about that. Within this particular lake, there's the water of 8 qualities. In fact, there are the different types of the water of the 8 different qualities, and over here it should be the 8 qualities of the conventional 8 qualities water. According to the Vinaya Sutra, it says that the celestial water of the 8 qualities and this particular water with the 8 qualities are different. Longchenpa, in his auto-commentary, he said that people without miraculous power won't be able to reach here. It would be very difficult for them to reach to this ocean. That is why the scientists and the geologists couldn't find it. It is said that since people without those miraculous powers would have an extremely difficult time to reach there, but around this particular ocean, there's the Jambuvipa tree, there are lots of lotus flowers and lots of beautiful water birds. Also, it is said that underneath the snow mountain, there are the practicing caves of 500 arhats, and surrounded over there are lots of ponds and lakes. Also, the celestial beings and protectors that would protect that area. It is indeed quite sacred and mystical. So this Gan Rinpoche is not just a sacred place for Buddhism. It is also considered by the Jainism and the Bon tradition, as well as the Hinduism, considered as a starting place for their religion or a sacred site for their religion. This has lots to do with the Snow Mountain itself. Many great siddhas would practice around there, and in the book of the great siddhas of the Himalayas, it talks about a great numbers of practitioners who would go there and practice. In the Vinaya Sutra, there are descriptions of a great number of arhats as well as Pratika Buddhas practices in that snow mountain as well, and they would manifest their miraculous powers and traverse to the cities in space. Many great stories like such. The Ganges Snow Mountain is still very much considered by the explorers and scientists as completely unique and mysterious, as well as very powerful. And that kind of view is shared by a great number of religious schools and religions as well. Till now, we are still not able to resolve the mystery about this Ganges mountain. Lots of the people without religion, the explorers, would go to Ganges mountains and would do their research and studies. Since we already talked about the Vajrasana, I don't think we need to talk about that. Let's look at the next one, which is the ocean without heated afflictions. From here, 4 rivers would spread and enter into different oceans of the 4 directions. This is also quite an important point. Many people feel that Tibet is very mysterious. In fact, not just the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism is special. The geography and the geology of Tibetan plateau is quite important as well. It is called the roof of the world. Why is that so? Because over here it says that in the 4 directions, the 4 waters would descend. The rivers of the horse mouth and the lion's mouth would enter into Ganges, taking twists and turns for 7 folds to the right of the ocean without heated afflictions. The 500 creeks would gather at one place and then enter into the oceans of the 4 directions. Many of the historians are quite interested in the descriptions because, as we know, the Ganges Snow Mountain is surrounded by the ocean without heated afflictions. But people would wonder, where is it? Some said that it is on the peak of the mountain, especially according to the Long Agama Sutra. But it is not seen over there. Nowadays we can see some of the videos. We don't really see that. But some said that there could be a lake underneath the Ganges mountain. Underneath the Ganges mountain, there are some lakes such as Mapang Yungco. But that is not, because Mapang Yungco is on the way to Sakya, and this sacred lake is to Lhasa. It's around that area. When Phuntsok Rinpoche went to India, we also passed by that area. Around this area, there's an ocean of the Nagas that is located in that area, and the shape is rather very different in terms of the mountains. or the cliffs. From the east, you can see that the mountain looks like an elephant, and that is the source of the spring from there. It is as if the spring came from the mouth of the elephant and then enters into Ganges River. From the seven folds of twists and turns of the ocean without heated afflictions, then the 500 creeks enters into the East Ocean. From the south, the shape looks like from the mouth of the king of Ox. Some said that the Hindu river is the Hindu river is the Indian river right now. It enters into the southern sea, the sea of the south direction. And in the west, there's the river of the elephant herd, or the herd of horses, and then the herd of peacocks. But in the Tibetan languages, it's not very clear. In the West, it says that it is the river came from the shape of the mouth of a horse. So in terms of this, I think the only fitting river is the Yarlu Tsangpo River. The ocean located of the west, there's a river that comes from the shape of the mouth of a lion that enters into the ocean of the north. In some of the sutras, some said that this particular river is called the herds of horse river. But according to Longchenpa, he said that. But according to Longchenpa, he didn't really describe that much. He didn't really say that. So according to some other sutras, there are different names and different descriptions of the rivers of the four directions. For example, in the east, it's called the herds of the horses, and the south is the herds of the elephants, and the west is the herds of the peacocks, and then the north is of the lions. Longchenpa over here states that the two ways of description are not contradicting to each other, but didn't really explain further. Previously, we said that there's the twists and turns of the river that takes seven folds. It means that out of the ocean, without heated afflictions, the water has already sprung and then continue to flow all the way into the East Ocean or the South Ocean. It kept on flowing into the ocean. And at the time of taking different turns, poetically speaking, it is described as seven folds. Sometimes we see those poets whenever they talk about someone flew over here because of the speed, or there are seven twists and turns, but it's very difficult to see those twists and turns. So it could be a very poetic language. And then over here it says that there are 500 creeks that also enters into different oceans. Do you remember where the Yarlu Tsangpo River which ocean does it enter?
南海，越南，南海，
Well, it's a long journey, and there must be over 500 creeks that would enter into the South Sea.
还有吴光尊在后面会讲的什么，对，但这个因为它这里的东南西北的这个海的话呢，实际上是可能根据就是当时这个
four directions
这个海，就是不一定是现在我们这个所谓的东南西北的海。就是这个可能它好像它
should be understood in the way of taking the Ganges Mountain as the center and then looking at its four directions, not necessarily our current four directions.
也认为是这个整个亚洲的中心，实际上是整个世界的中心，就是也有。
People would say that the Ganges Mountain is the center of Asia, but the Ganges Mountain is really the center of the world. I have a short video that I want to show you. It's rather 4 to 5 minutes. There are some information that is not quite correct within it, but some of the perspectives definitely worth our cross-reference and our contemplation. Through this particular description, we need to understand that Tibet is indeed very rare and very special. Especially the Ganges Mountain, it is full of blessings. In some ways, it is kind of similar to Jerusalem it is similar to Jerusalem because it is the starting place, the source of the three religions. Ganges River, the Ganges Mountain is considered as the source and starting place of the many religions of Asia as well. So the various religions would regard the Ganges Mountain as one of their most important sacred mountains. It is said various sages would practice in Ganges Mountains. I've looked into many resources and many books talking about the life of Jesus, for example. There was a gap in his lifetime. Many said that he practiced around the Ganges Mountain. But I didn't really want to talk too much about it because there would be people explain it in very different ways. So we can see that Ganges Mountain is not just the sacred mountain to Tibetan Buddhism. Rather, it is a very special place of practice to various religions. And there are very special causes and conditions as well as the meaningful and deep and profound meaning to practitioners. Some said that Ganges Mountain is the Sumeru Mountain. This particular teaching is not necessarily correct, but anyhow, we need different perspectives so that we can make our observation. While making observation, we need to understand that the various teachings that we've studied in the past through our educational systems are not necessarily all correct. And of course, I'm not saying that everything that is stated in Buddhism has to be completely accurate. I'm just saying that we need to make observations. If a mountain were to be surrounded by the four sacred animals and has over 100 pyramids within, being seen as the center of the world, wouldn't that mountain be considered as sacred and as mysterious? From the north of the Himalayas mountains, being paralleled with the Mount Everest, there is the sacred mountain that is Ganges Mountain. Though that Mount Everest is more famous and well known, the Ganges Mountain is of the most ancient and most mysterious and sacred. The Ganges Mountain The Gangrinpoche, the Gandes mountain, is the highest mountain of the Gandes mountain range. It is considered as the king of all the sacred mountains, being revered by the Tibetan Buddhists, being revered by also Jainism and Hinduism. It is also considered being blessed by great numbers of sages and masters of the various religions. It attracts various kinds of people to explore and to circumambulate this mountain. It is said that by circumambulate this mountain, then one would be able to cleanse all of the negative deeds, negative karmas. And then if one were to circumambulate it for 7 times, then one will not fall into the 3 lower realms for 500 lifetimes. The Gandes mountain is considered as the center of the universe because it carries the similar distance to all the signature landmarks in the world, some very important landmarks such as Stonehenge, the North Pole, the pyramids, as well as a few different sacred lakes and sacred mountains. For example, it has only about 100 kilometers to the Mapang-Yunco, as well as the Ghost Lake. Mapang-Yunco is the sweet water that's located on the highest altitude. It is stated as the emanated lake from the Brahmas. And then the Lamtso is said to be a ghost lake or the demon lake. In the Tibetan language, it is the poisonous black lake. The shape of them, one looks like a sun, and the demon lake looks more like a moon. One bright and one dark. From the Vedic tradition, it says that there is a mountain called Mount Sumeru, that is the holy mountain. According to the Vedas tradition, this Mount Sumeru is the center of the cosmos. Within this mountain, the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain connects the earth and heavens. The various description of the Gandes mountain is very much fitting into the Vedas tradition's description. The Gandes mountain is also called the center of the world mandala, since the shape of the world, the shape around that geography looks just like a blossomed lotus. If you were to look through the Google map, you would also be able to see an image of a smiling person. It is said that's the face of the Brahma. Also, if you change to a different angle, the shape looks like a swasti. Also, the 4 sides of Gandes mountain is said to be made of the rubies, gold, and of the lapis lazuli. The shape of it is just like a perfect pyramid. Some scientists said that the shape and the structure of Gandes mountain is very much fitting to the philosophy of the Vedas. Also, the 4 major rivers of India started from the Gandes mountain and divided the 4 areas or 4 directions of the mountains into the 4 continents. Well, that was a little too much, a little too long. Well, but that's okay. I simply wanted to provide some of the alternative perspective, where it says that the height is 66,066 meters in height. Himalaya mountain, the Mount Everest is 88,048 mountains. In fact, over here in the mountain Dege is about 5,000, over 5,000 meters. The altitude is not the highest, but it's not too low either. Many people used to circumambulate Gandis mountain, especially some lamas from here, while circumambulating the Gandis mountain, they would be able to directly enter into Nepal. But of course, nowadays you won't be able to do that anymore, since there's more strict border control. I remember that in the past we received a few couples from India and from Nepal. I asked them, how did you get here? They said that, I've been circumambulating Gandis mountain for a day or two, and then I just got here. And we were not found by crossing the borders. So that's back around that time. Many people would circumambulate over there. But nowadays, I think it's getting more difficult to gather all the causes and conditions to circumambulate the mountain. Now let us stop here today.